Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Agatha didn't think she was doing anything wrong. In fact, it would be more accurate to say that she knew she was doing something bad, but she couldn't stop. The forbidden temptation was too great, and she had good excuses for herself. Undress, the words barely escaped her lips. The doctor wrinkled her nose. It didn't sound right. And yet she was so eager to turn her sin into a performance for him, the imprisoned Joe. Agatha, 30, had grown up in a small town, but not a small town in an ordinary family. Except that her parents believed that after 18, the child is time to fly out of the parental nest, regardless of whether he wants it or not. And ready, they did not put her out of the threshold, on strictly said that she was more than welcome at home. Relations with parents were not warm, so that resentment though there was, but did not wound deeply. The girl entered the budget in the medical school, even successfully settled in the dormitory as a non-resident. But alas, it soon became clear that the genius, capable of claiming a warm place in a private clinic, she will not become. But Agatha was stubborn. Received a diploma, never, by the way, not buying coursework, got a job in an ordinary hospital and worked with dedication, hand, heart, bursting in troubles and responsiveness. But so many irreparable troubles were around, so depressing was every day, as if greeted by the sign, dreams don't come true, and don't get your hopes up, that one day she waved her hand and decided why take it to heart if there was no boomerang for good. But when he showed up, Sam, an aspiring businessman, she fell in love without a second thought. She dreamed of wearing a mink coat and diamonds, eating caviar with spoons. How banal her friends laughed when she shared her hopes, but it was her everything to the drop, that for the sake of which in the new day she went to the already hated work. The climax came when Agatha found out she was pregnant, except Sam said it wasn't part of his plans. There was a terrible fight, and when Agatha woke up, she was no longer pregnant. And the man who seemed to have taken her heart and shattered it like a glass trinket was gone, running away, taking her life savings and all the appliances from the apartment where she lived. While she was sick, while the whole nightmare was dragging on, Agatha suddenly realized how unreliable, petty many in many years, seemingly friends turned out to be. The only pleasant and unexpected surprise was the arrival of Tony, an acquaintance from her hometown. He was 8 years older than Agatha. He came from a small village called Colorado. Tony had moved to the city for his dream of going to culinary school. They met in the company of mutual friends. Agatha had just turned 18 and was about to leave to go to medical school. Tony gave signs of attention, which the girl understood as friendly. He was the first to visit Agatha in the hospital. For her sake, he took a vacation at his own expense, told her that he rented an apartment and spoiled her with homemade delicious food. To him, the only one, she confided her pain and confessed that she would never, ever love again. He listened, looked carefully, and said he believed that one day she would find someone who would make her happy. Surely she would. When she stopped being a patient at the hospital and went back to work, the head doctor, who had a fatherly way of treating Agatha and seeing what she had become, suggested to her that there was a position in a place where he hoped the young woman could heal through mercy, treating those who were being punished for an atrocity committed. She agreed, just for a change of scenery. But this mentor would be horrified if he knew what Agatha was doing in her office with a man who was legendary throughout the colony. It doesn't seem to hurt. Another unnecessary checkup, his obscenely healthy and snow-white smile whipped into a sneer. But he complied. I know better, she snorted and clomped on her heels. She preferred comfortable and practical shoes at work, but these stiletto heels were waiting for such a special occasion, like the scarlet lipstick carefully applied to her plump lips, like the lacy lingerie set with a price tag half a month's salary, like the perfume with a hard-to-pronounce French name. It wasn't the first time she'd seen his body, but every time she saw it, it sent shivers down her spine, and he seemed to notice her feminine weakness, and for that she hated him twice as much. Tall, under 2 meters, muscular, as if he never got out of the gym. Facial features as if chiseled from stone to pineapple hump beautiful. He was only 24, a boy by her standards. Agatha circled him and touched the hollow on his lower back with her fingertips. A storm of sensation. Maybe you can tell me where all this came from. His torso was covered in scars, and it was eerie, even for her, who'd seen a lot of trauma, to imagine how they could have been inflicted. In her teasing caresses, she'd always skirted them. And then there were his tattoos. Never had she seen such a thing on any of the sitters. What do they even mean, mystery and masterpiece? Hieroglyphics and images of animals reminiscent of cave paintings. If I tell you, I'll have to get rid of you. She couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. She stopped in front of him and pressed her palm against his chest. Her heart was beating hard and steady. If someone had woken her up in the night and asked her, she could have recited his medical records by heart, but the truth was, they didn't contain the things that usually and often plagued the inmates. Joe was strong. He'd never been sick once in all his time here. He'd only been injured, but the injuries he'd sustained had not healed so quickly that a colleague had once goggled and told her that he'd never seen such regeneration in his life, that it was a unique case. Agatha looked at the prisoner's handsome face, and a fantasy flashed through her mind. How he might look if his brown hair grew to such a length that the mane covered his head in a curly wave. How he might look in a stylish, expensive suit. A dream man. You go to the ends of the earth for one. But Agatha realized that no dream man would ever take her to the ends of the earth, because she wasn't like that. Agatha couldn't say exactly what was wrong with her. Just everything. Appearance, the most mediocre figure, of course, nothing. But a sedentary job and not the healthiest diet already make hints of future overweight. Education not brilliant, hobbies, knowledge. She didn't consider herself stupid, but she wouldn't call herself smart either. And that made her angry, because that's not how things were supposed to work out. The bitter imprint of the past made the woman think the worst of herself. Agatha was convinced that maybe there was something weak and foolish about her that attracted the one who broke her heart, and she swore to herself that it wouldn't happen again. But with this handsome man, there was a story. She was about to take full advantage of her position. Threats and blackmail as she found a weakness. Temptation, after all, she is a woman. But he was like an iceberg. She touched him, hugged him a little, and once he gave her a kiss, playfully, when she got too close. For that, she whipped her palm across his face and snickered that he was hitting on her. He didn't deny it, but when they met again, he gave her a look that kept her up at night. Here we go again. You should tell your man not to give her that disgusting perfume. What did you say? I snapped her out of her musings, and she clenched her palm, now digging her nails into his shoulder. Doesn't the scent suit you? Or are you to judge what suits me? I burst into flames. No one knew if he had someone there, a man of mystery. I mean, I sort of found out that he had some family there. Far away, but that was it. One day she happened to talk to one of the guards, who became not that a friend, but an acquaintance, with whom it was possible to calmly and even entertainingly exchange a few words. And so he told me that he had once heard a wolf growl right in the zone. It was in the yard where the prisoners were walking. He went to the strange sound and found that 3 men stood near him and looked at him fearfully. And he looked back at them and his eyes were not good, as if they were not human at all. He smiles at them, but like he's grinning. And then suddenly his expression changed back. Bullshit, Agatha shrugged. The story made her feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm telling you, that was before you were here. What do you think? I don't like him. Do you accept him? I took the Hippocratic Oath. He's a human being too, and if I have to, I'll give him let go. Yeah, he hummed. And now Agatha stood before the one who had robbed her of her peace and didn't know what to do. Why aren't you paying attention to me? Joe's eyebrow arched, lips trembling in a ready grin. I seem to be answering all the questions accurately, doctor, and following the advice given. You are an idiot. You've been here a long time, and I'm a woman. A single woman. Her arms have already reached up to wrap around his muscular shoulders. She pressed her luscious breasts against me. Beneath the robe, a blouse with a deep neckline to show the lace of her lingerie. The epitome of seduction. But he hit me like a shot. You are not looking for fun, but for salvation. Agatha caught the air with her mouth. How dare you? You do. Am I wrong? Every time I'm here and not bleeding, you want me to give you a moment that will turn your world upside down, that you'll remember forever. And you know, you're not such a bad person. I know you do something for others. There's a light left in you. Shut up, she whispered and pulled away, turned away, wrapped her robe tighter and walked to the desk. There was a rustle of papers. How's the shoulder? The doctor's dry, businesslike tone, inquiring about the patient's health. In the meantime, Joe's return to his cell had been impatiently awaited. One man, Mark, came from a small village with only 5 residential yards left and had taken a crooked path. He committed his first theft at 12. Home was a mess. Mother and stepfather were drinking, nothing to eat. Then he was just scolded for a long time. He got so much trouble at home that he thought he wouldn't survive. After 4 years he did it again, but not for bread with canned goods, chocolate and macaroni he went, but for money to the cash register in the forest. He was lucky that he didn't have time to take it, and suddenly the shopkeeper himself stopped by. He knew what a difficult situation the boy was in at home. His mother and stepfather had been on such a bender that they were practically invalids. They didn't work a day. The shopkeeper took pity on the boy and gave him a job to help carry boxes and clean. The boy was nicknamed Kulik at home because of his injuries. His left hand was always bent, his fingers were crooked, so someone thought of a sandpiper who waited for a foot and hopped. The nickname stuck. The guy did not remember exactly how mangled, only a strange picture of trembling rose from early childhood, like dabbled at home in something fell pinned. Mark worked at the store until he came of age, and then went to the big city. He just found an ad at the bus stop and went, but almost got into a workhouse. Mark spent the night at the train station until some guy noticed him. He fed him, talked about life, and offered a job from which you can rise. I stole the first 5 cars as ordered. My head was dizzy with easy money. I was caught on 6 when the verdict was announced. If I could do that, I could turn back time. It was too late to think about how wrong he was. Once in the zone, Mark thought for the second time you would make it. But then Joe's defense attorney suddenly showed up. He just scattered Mark's offenders as they approached and told them not to touch him anymore. "Well, you're lost," quietly and pitifully even said Grandpa Jim, a man on the verge of retirement age and a recidivist with a record of a third of a century. "You've got the wrong people on your ass." "What?" Mark was already happy, thanked his grandmother for interceding in his fate, and then he was shocked. "I'm telling you, he's not human. Jim didn't say a word in a day. It's no big deal." And then he opened up. "You think they're staying away from him for nothing?" "No, it's not for nothing. It's just the way it is." "You've got something to say, grandfather." "I have nothing to say. Only I didn't see you for good, you damned wolf." And after that, Jim was even more silent than before. That evening, when Joe was taken to the doctor's office, Mark was sour, for it was nearing the time when his advocate and protector would be released. It wouldn't be long before Mark's will was waiting. What would he do then? Would Joe be supported there in the big world, or would he forget the semblance of friendship that had arisen between them? Mark somehow did not dare to ask. All he got out was that he had a big family. Interesting, friendly, and Joe didn't seem to scold them. Mark didn't dare to ask something that had been on his mind for a long time. Could it be possible there, on the outside, not to forget each other, to help each other in a brotherly way? There was something else that frightened him, not that he seemed to see the back of his head, that he could read people's moods, that he was terribly strong. And this whole thing about what he did. He was captured in an antique salon. He broke into it at night, destroyed many works of art, and not just like that, but burned them. They said there was something ritualistic about it, something dark, medieval. The whole story made you wonder who was Joe? Was he a normal person or a psycho? But Mark chose to live with it for now and be grateful for the support. The creak of the door brought him out of his musings. Mark looked up. Joe looked silently at the camera and walked through, sat on the floor with his legs folded as always, as if in meditation. Didn't say anything about the meeting with the doctor. But after about an hour or so there was silence. Suddenly he turned and looked straight into his eyes. "Don't be afraid of what's to come." And something flashed in his eyes that made Mark stop being afraid. And he realized that once fate had brought him and Joe together, there was no turning back. A couple of weeks passed, and all that time Agatha fought desperately, as if she had a severe flu, with uncomplicated thoughts about the beautiful tongue, which instead of becoming her instrument of pleasure, had become a personal curse. One day, to clear her head from going through papers, making reports on bandages and the like, Agatha went out of the infirmary into the street. Finding herself in the fresh air, she inhaled a full breath. The weather was fine. Suddenly she felt threatened. Someone said that working in such a place develops intuition, and here it was. She gave me a hint, made me tense up, even though you don't know where the threat is coming from. "Agatha, hurry!" From the corner of the building ran out of the guard, the same one who told the acquaintance about the growling that happened in the exercise yard. He waved his hand. "One bad, in a seizure beats. I'm afraid to touch. Maybe epilepsy. I'm coming." In a few minutes I returned, grabbed my suitcase, and rushed off. The traditional place for prisoners to walk was bustling with activity. Huddled together in a pile under the watchful gaze of the guards, and one was squirming on the ground with a groan and twisting in a strange fit. Agatha crouched down. It was a convict nicknamed Bean. His reputation was disgusting. He had served his sentence not the first time and was increasingly maligned. He was the only one who was contemptuous of Joe and hadn't blurted out that he'd teach him a lesson one day. Only Agatha saw exclusively the patient now. Gently she turned his head to the side. "Sure, it's all right. Can you talk? We need to get him to the infirmary." But suddenly the patient fell silent, and the next moment Agatha screamed, feeling herself grabbed, dragged to her feet, and something sharp jabbed into her side. "Hands off, let go," shouted the guard who had brought the doctor, realizing what had happened. There was a commotion on the other side of the courtyard. It was something unexpected and unthinkable. What were they expecting? "She's a hostage," Bim smirked, giving Agatha rotten breath from behind his dark teeth. "He thinks they're going to let him go like this?" asked Mark quietly, but he didn't get an answer as he expected. What a fool. But that's not what someone thought. Bim and 4 other convicts had devised a daring plan and intended to carry it out at any cost. The next moment there was commotion, shouting, noise, guards trying to calm the prisoners. Bean shouted a demand, the men scurried about, and at one moment a small group of Zeks, the very ones in Bean's gang, were very close to their leader, but they did not notice Joe touching them. The Zeks did notice him when he threw the last of them down in one motion, so much so that he grabbed his arm and couldn't get up. "I recommend you let the doctor go and voluntarily surrender to the guards. Your discretion will be rewarded," Joe said. All eyes turned toward him. "Get out of here," said one of the prisoners. The guards called for reinforcements and surrounded the rioters. It was more difficult to approach Bim. The doctor could be heard at any moment. "That's it, you're finished," shouted Bean. "Finish him off." The convicts swarmed on one of them. What happened next could not be called an ordinary fight. Agatha had seen something like it only in martial arts movies, and it lasted only minutes. Joe moved fantastically, lightly and smoothly, as if in a dance, but so swiftly that his opponents fell one by one. "You!" The enraged Boer let go of Agatha. His plan had been disrupted, and he intended to get even. Now that the woman was free, the guards swarmed toward the convicts. But Beam still had time to jump up to Joe. He wanted to hit him, and for good, but he just grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Beam wasn't afraid of the law or the devil. I looked into his eyes. They were gray, but they looked yellow in the sun. Not evil, no, but as a beast might look. And then Ben was scared for the first time in his life. "Ask the doctor for forgiveness." I'm sorry, he whimpered, clinging to Joe's arm. "Don't hurt him, please." Joe let him go, or rather a man weighing under a pound. Joe, seeming to exert no more effort than a piece of cardboard, simply tossed him aside, and it was over. Joe wasn't even out of breath. "You were all right," he tossed to Agatha, who had barely gotten up with the help of her familiar guard and was sobbing. "Now you owe me one wish, and you owe me one wish," agreed. He said mundanely, as if the defeated convicts were not lying nearby, as if they were not here at all. Agatha flapped her eyelashes, completely losing the essence of what was happening, but her lips opened as if by themselves, and she said, thinking in parallel about what she was doing, madness. "I agree. What do you want? Tell me why you're so mean." The convicts pushed to the other side of the yard and watched this finale with amazement and admiration for his power. How he did it? Naturally, there was a great trial with what Bean had prepared. The head of the colony was a strict man, but he summoned him to him and thanked him. And all the inmates talked for a long time about how it was that Bean was the one they all hated. Joe wasn't just shunned, but to Bim many had serious claims, and all his henchmen, who created a game even by the standards of experienced sitters, scattered, and doctor, as rumor had it that she often called him not then to treat, and he her as a shame took her to respect him. For such a joke, Mark after this case even became a little proud, because he was considered as the nearest person to his unloved one, and he showed himself in an unexpected way. A few more weeks passed, and the day came when he was supposed to be set free. It happened on a clear day when the sun shone so brightly that the air seemed to take on color. Agatha sat at her desk in her office, mindlessly poring over papers. She just needed something to occupy herself, not to look at the clock, not to think that a mysterious, insufferable, and at the same time attractive man was about to be on the loose. Where will he go? Is there a woman there who will throw herself on his neck? Who will set the table for him in the evening with a hot dinner? And then, fool, summed up her reflections, doctor, and reminded herself that in the case of Joe, no chance was not initially, because it is well known what ends the history of relationships with such like him, convicts. Their words and promises are lies. When Agatha finally decided to look at her watch, it was all over. Joe had already left the walls of the penal colony. He was free. But there was something else that troubled Agatha, and a lot more than Joe leaving. She realized that what had happened would not let her go, would come back as nightmares. When she saw glimpses of convicts, out of the corner of her eye, she saw Bim in everyone's face. At first, she wrote it off to the effects of stress, but it didn't get any easier. It was hard to concentrate on work. Agatha fell down in the evening without energy. Any food made her sick. Everything in the office was irritating. Then one day she decided to quit. She had some savings, but it would be enough to get by for a while. Rent an apartment, the cheapest, look for a place. If she wasn't lucky at all, she could go back to her parents in her hometown. They seemed to be convinced that her daughter had grown up to be an independent, serious person, and were not against taking her back, especially since age was making itself felt and they could use some help. Agatha told them nothing about what had happened to her, that first incident of unhappy and dangerous love for Sam. She didn't want to hear that she was a fool and it was her own fault. Soon Agatha left her position as a doctor in the colony and found herself in the city that had given and taken away her greatest hopes. But somehow she was lucky enough to find an apartment rented by an old woman who had moved in with her daughter. Agatha counted the money, enough for 2 or 3 months, and started looking for a job. One day Agatha was coming home from another interview and was approaching the entrance. "Agatha, please wait." Suddenly a girl's voice sounded behind her. Turning around, the woman saw a stranger hurrying towards her. She was tall and slender. Long legs and pink sneakers flashed from under a scarlet sundress like the feet of a heron. She was young. Blonde, stunningly long, below the hips hair flowed golden red waves, with each hurried checker chalk. Phew, barely caught up. "I'm sorry," she stopped, bowed sharply, placing her palms in her knees. "Who are you?" asked Agatha, confused. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you well, and I told you a lot about you." The stranger smiled so sincerely, warmly, that it gave a cozy tingle in the heart, as if there was a person in front of you, with whom you could develop a strong and reliable friendship. But the mention of a name prevented this impression from blossoming. "Joe who?" I frowned. What a day this was. Not that Joe. "You were his doctor," the girl smiled again. But Agatha, as a defensive wall within herself, shot up from that smile. "I purely physically cannot remember all my patients. Some of them, I'm sorry to say, I'd like to forget them like a bad dream." "What's going on with this Joe of yours? Any complications? Problems? If that's the case, he better see the doctor he's seeing at the moment." "Who are you anyway?" "Oh." The girl accelerated, finally clasped her palms, the map, and flashed her eyes, hiding another smile. "Did you think I was his girlfriend?" "No, Joe's my big brother." It was only then that Agatha realized that the girl shared the same eyes with her brother. Gray like a stormy sky, like they were speckled with amber. Only his eyes were dusky, threatened by half-buried pain. This young beauty has an open, pure look, beaming as if clouds, through which the sun beams and spring rain is about to splash. "But I don't work anywhere as a doctor now. I don't see how I can." "You can." The strange girl splashed her hands. She was so agile in general that it seemed she couldn't stand still for a minute. "Only you can. Let's talk. My name is Mai. I'm not asking for a visit. That would be rude, but it's a long story. It's not really convenient outdoors. Why don't we go to a cafe? Take your pick, whatever you like." "My treat." Agatha shook her head. "Let's just say I can pay for a cup of coffee." "I'm not offended," she added hastily, and when the joy slid off May's face for a moment, she smiled again. "It's just that it's all strange. You show up, you say something about Joe. All right," I sighed, thinking that I was tired of standing like this after being in the city all day. Come on, there's a pancake house nearby, okay? I love pancakes. Abitha used to go to this pancake house herself. It was decorated in style. Even the waitresses wore sundresses. And mushrooms, too. The golden-haired girl finished listing the order. Agatha doubted very much that two people could handle what she had ordered. May, by the way, had insisted that she was the one to serve the pancakes, and the tea was paid for by a new acquaintance. She assured me that otherwise she'd be offended. It's not customary for them, a man occupied with conversation and not treated. Who established such strange customs, Agatha did not ask, and already her head was spinning. So, let's get on with it. What happened to Joe and why did you come to me? Is he sick? May, who had eaten the first couple of pancakes, sighed and bowed her head. Actually, Joe's as healthy as ever, but he's in danger because of me. You see, they want to marry me off, and he wants to stop it. How old are you? May, how about you? Shyly asked the girl, and it was impossible to refuse her. Okay, how old are you? May, 18. It's father-son's birthday. And you're getting married? Do you want to do it yourself? I asked cautiously. The mention of some deity, obviously pagan, made me wary. No, I don't want to be the wife of an old man. Agatha choked. May, I'm sorry, what faith? The one that is dead and alive forever. She lowered her eyes, answering as if she'd been taught. The one that came from the forest with the beasts and brought salvation to the lost. It's a great sin to dedicate a stranger, but heaven forgive me. She put her hand to her mouth, bit her little finger and began her story. It turned out that May and Joe were the only children of the head of the Wolf clan. To be more precise, it was a family with an ancient and rich history, and they believed they were descended from a werewolf. There were several other such families, only they believed they were not descended from a werewolf, a wolf, but from other wizards who could pretend to be other beasts, foxes and martens, lynxes and bears. All these families lived in a mansion, worked hard, and stayed away from the cities. They did not invite those who came to work for them, but they did not persecute those who came to increase their wealth. They didn't force people to believe in their own, but if they agreed to honor their ancestors, that is, the beasts of the werewolves, they had serious obligations. And so May wished to take a neighbor as a wife. He was an old neighbor, but he had something favorable to offer the father of the maidens, and they agreed. Agatha listened and didn't understand how such nonsense could be going on in the modern world, with other clans named after beasts. May, I'm sorry, but you seem to be living in a cult, she answered honestly and looked at the pancake on her plate without appetite. Strawberries and cream were my favorite, but I couldn't get it down my throat. I understand that, the girl said unexpectedly, but that's the way I was brought up. Do you live in the middle of nowhere? Like we used to. We don't live in cities, but in villages. Sometimes she leaves. Some people decide whether to live in the village or move to the city. In general, 100 years ago everything was much stricter, and today many people have forgotten their customs. But my father doesn't want to. We live near Colorado. Colorado? Agatha shook her head. She remembered that she had an acquaintance from there. Yes, my father wanted to send me to university to study to be a teacher, to teach our local children, but I want to be a teacher. Not for the clan, but for ordinary village children. My mother was a scholar. May reached for the sugar bowl and put a cube in her mouth. Only her second wife, and that was a long time ago, gone in childbirth. But Sarah, my brother's mom, raised me like her own. I decided to study in this city. I submitted my documents, and my father demands that I return and get married, and my husband won't let me. I can't study, I can't work. Well, you're all sorted out. But what about Joe? By the way, exclaimed so that they turned to them neighboring tables. What happened anyway? All I know is he trashed the antiquities store. May reached for another clay, but changed her mind and told about Joe. Turns out the wolves had a visitor in the house one day, a distant relative. A distant relative had come and taken away a lot of valuable things without asking. That is, stolen them. They found out that he decided to sell it to rich collectors. We haggled to get it back. His father, the head of the clan, had a heart attack. So Joe snapped out of it and drove into town. He decided to punish the offender, but he escaped earlier, so Joe only destroyed everything in the saloon. An ancient ritual to make the spirits forgive. His father was angry at his son for doing such a thing, because he asked him not to do anything in the heat of the moment. Joe apologized and even asked him not to visit him in the zone, not to further embarrass his family. May, no offense, but you say things I don't know if I believe. I don't believe in spirits, the girl said seriously. I only tell you how we see it. What about Joe? Does he believe in all that? Werewolves? Spirits? He's hesitating. He doesn't want to let everyone down. Our clan. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'd be a renegade. The clan's losing its power. It's losing its power. My father would like Joe to be in charge, but he's been procrastinating. May, you're confusing me. All right, let's get to the point. Why is Joe in danger and how can I help? Joe wants to stand up for me, say he's against marriage, but as a single man, he doesn't have a say. He needs a wife, then his vote will be accepted and I won't be married. Agatha looked at the girl. She was young and beautiful. Her eyes were huge. Her freckles were scattered. Agatha wanted to laugh and scream at the same time because she understood very little. And what she understood was such a wild picture, and where would he get a wife? Can you marry him? Joe? Holds from the Wolf clan. For a few minutes they looked at each other in silence. The girl? Agatha raised her hand, waved at the passing waitress. The bill, please, and turned back to May. It was delicious, it was interesting. But no, I'm sorry, sweetheart. You have somewhere else to turn with all this, with being forced to marry, having no right. Joe, that one. I don't mean to offend you, but he's an idiot. To ruin his life and ruin mine too, huh? To get married? Yeah, how is that even possible? No, according to your usual rules, you have to get married, the girl said pitifully and sniffled. It was clear that she was about to cry. In our custom, it is not even the bride's wife will be announced, only for a day or two. Then you can say that you don't like the way we live and that you changed your mind about getting married. We don't judge that kind of thing. Well, the bride looked at the bride and changed her mind. It happens. And that old man, he won't ask me to marry him a second time. Nobody does that. Please help me, or Joe will die. Agatha, who had already managed to pay the bill for herself, while May was preparing another speech, froze, started to get up from the sofa, and sank back down. Will you stay with us again? There was a waitress nearby. Apparently, I'll have to. I'll have another coffee black, please. When the waitress left, Agatha reached for May, who had clenched her fingers so tightly around the cup of tea, she was afraid it would crack. Soothingly, he touched the girl's hand. Don't cry, and just if you can, quickly and simply tell me why Joe might be dead, and why you can't find him another wife instead of me. Who? You know, we didn't get along much while he was there, and I told you once myself, stranger, not of your kind, tried. So how can I be for him? It turned out that if Joe had opposed his sister's marriage without a full voice in the clan, he would have had to go out for a ritual fight with the groom to have the power to forbid the action. A decrepit grandfather. Agatha marveled. I've seen what Joe can do. He's an old man, as you say, 100 years old. No, my fiancé has the right to field a fighter in any fight in his place to defend the honor of the clan. And even 3 if they go against an unmarried man. And his grandsons are mighty, Joe can't stand up to them. So, putting her elbows on the table, Agatha rubbed her temples. Her hand was full of some fabulous, obviously abnormal information and ached. And another option, you just run, money, passports taken and go. If you have money, as you say, that rich clan, you can even go to the other side of the world. Daddy won't survive it. And Mama Sarah, I can't run away, neither of us, neither of me. I don't want to run away. I love mine, but I can't talk about it. Nonsense, horror, cult. What am I in for? May went on to talk about why she thought Agatha would be the best wife for Joe. All of her usual female acquaintances who might agree would do so wholeheartedly, because Joe was an enviable groom, and he himself was unwilling to commit himself to the bonds of marriage. Agatha, on the other hand, as May hoped, would agree simply to play the part of the bride, without claiming the fellow for real. I believe quickly. No, don't smile at me like that. Except I haven't said yes yet. I put my hands out in a protective gesture. When May almost glowered at the almost wrenched consent, it also turned out that the clan would accept Agatha because she was a kind person who took pity on a caged animal. Agatha was also a doctor, and such people were respected and highly valued by all clans. The conversation flowed on and on. Soon the pancake house would be closed to the public. Agatha thoughtfully tapped her fingers on the tabletop. Andre, Suppose, just suppose, that I would agree to this madness. Suppose even if I had free time on vacation, you'd be allowed to be a bride. You've really been good to him. Oh. Agatha felt herself blushing because her kindness was peculiar. Joe had probably spared his sister, and how you distorted, softened your stay in the zone. You were embarrassed, she praised. That's true, May added very offhandedly and nodded hurriedly. Help. It was the craziest night of Agatha's life. Soon the waitress said in an embarrassed voice that the establishment was closing to the public. I need to think, May. Do you have a phone? Well, I don't live in the woods. The girl smiled and twirled the smartphone of her purse in her hands. Oh, here are our photos with my brother, even children's photos. Do you want to see? Not now, so May, we have some time. Maybe we can meet again. Let's say the day after tomorrow. Yeah, sure. They exchanged phone numbers, said goodbye, and to her own morning surprise, Agatha slept better than ever that night. The next day she planned to go to the mall, but instead she dialed Tony's number right after breakfast. Hello, how are you? I'm out in the country helping my mother. Yeah, potatoes don't dig themselves, for Christ's sake, I quit my job. At home, I've got a lot of problems. My mother's worse, I have to fix everything. It's bad luck for you? I'm sorry. You probably don't care about me at all. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Why? I'm always happy to talk to you. It's nice here in the village, you know. Not like in the city. Fresh air, a river, berries again. Mother's just not getting any younger. It's a bit hard to manage alone. But nothing, we'll get by somehow. How are you doing? That's why I'm calling. I need your advice. Something wrong? That's one way to put it, but it's a story of dead. When can I call you back? Let me take care of the potatoes and other things. Yeah. So, I'll call you tonight around 8 o'clock. Is that okay? Great, I'm waiting. I went to the mall, bought a new set of linens, a cute mug with a purple hippo with a bouquet of daisies in it, and an assortment of candy too. When she got home, Agatha took a bath and settled down in front of the TV. She didn't feel like standing at the stove, so for dinner, aka lunch, she had stuffed cabbage from the cookhouse ready, but she had no time to immerse herself in the picture of love. As the phone rang, now you're free, tell me what happened. And Agatha told everything without secrecy. Tony listened attentively, didn't interrupt. You know, all this is very serious. His friend's voice sounded tense. Ideally, it would be better to forget about this story, not to answer May's calls, lock the doors and sprinkle salt on the threshold. Tony, what are you talking about? I know. You're lucky to have adventures. Listen to me, I'll teach you how to pass. Animal clans have been known in our village for a long time. Well, as known at the level of stories. Some old people believe in them. Young people, of course, consider them fairy tales. And you don't think so? I personally think it's, if you like, a kind of extended family. Sort of like they were in the Middle Ages. They're noble families, but they know each other primarily by faith. They're a strange sect. How can I tell you? It's not at all crazy. They don't recruit anyone. They don't take away people's apartments. The family is slowly going crazy, but they have the right to live as they wish. Yes, as I know, they raise their children decently up to the age of consciousness. They don't fill their heads too much. Then it depends on the kind of person. If he has the character and views of their breed, they take care of him. If not, if he wants to leave, they let him go. But it's common if they're simple. And those at the top, they are more tightly bound by all sorts of obligations. It's all very murky. No, ours, of course, work from villages and hamlets. They have a job, but somehow they get paid and keep silent. Maybe they have a confidentiality agreement, I don't know. They told me so much about these wolves and other zoo. You think I should just say no? You'd be involved in deceiving the head of the clan, which, I'm sorry, could have repercussions. They're peaceful, they're just uncommunicative. They don't talk to the locals much. It's not just Colorado, there's villages around here. It's just that they tend to recruit more from there. So maybe the people there know more. Tommy, you explain to me how these clans can exist under the animal minds. And these are such brutal traditions, you know. They're just sitting in the middle of nowhere, sitting quietly. They buy money, that means those who have stronger family morals, those who move to the city for their interests. But these are few in general, as I know, they still believe in this mysticism strongly. So they have loud animal names and amulets not only for this entourage. Tony, you're quite the encyclopedia, aren't you? Yeah. And for you, knowledge is not a pity to share. Aside from the other side, it's just that my great-grandfather was a hunter and was very interested in all this. I read books from him. By the way, that's an idea. We should look in the town library. What are we looking for? The works of a scientist. His last name's kind of weird. Well, actually a pseudonym. I think he lived in the 19th century, but his work is about fairy tales and history. Legend of Our Places. They were reprinted in the 50s. Go and read it. It's very interesting. I'd love to read it, but what am I going to do with May? So, after what I said, she didn't change her mind. Yeah. Avitha, don't take any chances. I can see why you're in over your head. I don't know why you decided to help him. But, Agatha, think about it, it's not good. It's not good to deceive people, to meddle in someone else's family. In fact, I've saved May too. That's right too. So you've decided to go? I guess so. Oh shit, no offense. I'm just thinking of ways to help you. Books alone won't be enough. It's gonna take a long time to make a shifter amulet. Tony, Agatha exclaimed again and turned on the light in the room because it was getting dark outside the window and she was uncomfortable. I've got it. Something rumbled from Tony's side. A bucket dropped from the porch with the feed. Chickens, just a minute. Agatha waited patiently. Everything. Okay, what I'm saying is, I got an idea. Now that things are going so well, I'll go with you. We'll say I'm your brother-in-law, we'll make up a story, but we'll embellish the reality a little even for evil. You'll say you've known me for years, that I'm like a brother to you. The whole predatory clan will accept that with his bride came a man who was kind of responsible for her, instead of her own father, for example. The legend will pass, we'll be like undercover agents. Ha. We'll get away with it, and we'll be alive. Don't scare me, Tony. I may have an even better idea in mind, but I'm gonna need some time. You say it won't take long, just a couple days. Well, I'll leave my mother alone for a while. I'll ask my neighbor, who's a little younger, to come over more often, or we'll be done with your fiancé May. Oh, by the way, your Joe ain't no savage. He's a real gray wolf. Oh, Tony, the joke made Agatha smile. What'd I do without you? I wish you'd realized that a lot earlier. Well, let's not dredge up the past. Call your May and tell her I'll be here a couple days this week, so we'll all go to Colorado. And from there, wherever it takes us, the poor and the brave. Soon after this conversation, Agatha called May and said that she agreed to help, but on condition that her old, good, and trustworthy friend would go with her, because alone, I'm sorry, but it was a bit dangerous to go. May replied that, naturally, she didn't mind. Tony's assumption was confirmed. May was even glad that Agatha had a male chaperone in her entourage, even if not a relative. The next few days it took for a friend to pack up and arrive. Agatha busied herself with all the things she had previously planned. For the time of the forced vacation, she went through all the clothes, resolutely promising herself to throw out what was no longer the right size or completely worn out, rewatched her favorite miniseries Space Duke and Infinity Tiger. But still the past events did not allow me not to get into the taste of classes, not to relax. Therefore, although it was raining outside the window, Agatha, with the opposite of the weather sultry enthusiasm, gathered to meet Tony at the station. And no sooner had the man caught his breath after the crowd of passengers leading the train, than she flew up to him and even, which however, for herself was unexpected, hugged him. Oh, hello. Tony was confused by such a meeting, but weightlessly, fearfully so embraced in response, clapped him below the shoulder blades. You shouldn't be traveling in this weather. Sampo got there, uncomfortable, I threw up on you. Come on, it's nice in the village, but boring. And so we have an adventure. Wink the occasion, it means to peek at how the rich and famous live. Got lucky with transportation on the way to Agatha's apartment. Came up one by one. Not you could almost. The woman hurriedly put the tea on and put the cutlets and mashed potatoes on to warm. She herself would have sat down with pleasure on sandwiches, but Tony was miserable somehow and worked at the stove. Very tasty, he praised, taking a fourth cutlet for a refill. Even I don't know how to make a cutlet like that. Agatha shook her head, slicing the charlotte. No, really, it's delicious. Your husband will be lucky, he added quietly. Agatha shook her head. Oh, means it? It was all she could afford at home now. After a hearty dinner, over tea they talked a little about what was to come. Tony generously told me everything he knew. The book I brought with me, I found it at home. He went to the bag in the room. Here he plumped a weighty, suspiciously dilapidated-looking book on the tabletop. He gently unfolded it to the right page, and Agatha dove into the reading. It turned out that clans with beast names had come to these parts among the first settlers, and as soon as they came, they settled down firmly, solidly, because they were preparing not just to settle the uninhabited lands, but to organize their possessions where they would be full masters. For centuries, they lived quietly or almost quietly. They don't write much here. I'm at the side, looking ahead. After the historical background came the heads, where the legends of the Kalans were set, accompanied by black and white illustrations of some obviously predatory beasts. I didn't want to watch such a thing at night. Thought it might be good for us to bring along. Do you think the hosts will mind? No, of course not. They're not gonna search our stuff. Just keep it out of sight. Tuck it in a bag under your stuff, in private. But it's late, we can go to bed. I'll sit up in the kitchen. There's nothing on the couch. Tony, there's no sofa. It's only for a kitten. I'll go in the kitchen, I'm the little one. And you on the bed. You think I'm going to feel normal after I get a woman out of bed? You think I'm going to feel normal? And don't argue, I'll take a nap. And tomorrow I'll sleep on the train. In the morning they woke up early and had breakfast without hurry. Agatha called May to make sure that everything was going as planned, and all the participants of the adventure went to the train station. It's nice to meet you. May smiled radiantly at Tony, giving him an unexpectedly strong handshake. At last they got into the compartment. Tony said that as a man would take the top shelf, May volunteered to sit on the other one. I like heights, she said, and began to rummage through her wicker bag. As soon as the train started, there was fried chicken, boiled eggs, smoked sausage, cheese, and some baked pies on the table. On Agatha and Tony's side, there were supplies too. Although there were clearly reasons to keep the others occupied, Tony was a little sad that he couldn't flaunt his Bavarian talents in front of Agatha, of course. But there just wasn't time to cook at this rate. Agatha had heard of the beauty of the Colorado countryside, but had no idea how much smaller they were than the reality she had discovered. Whether the summer was to blame or her mind, overwhelmed by the gray cityscape cube of life's turmoil. But it seemed to her that she hadn't seen anything more beautiful. The lush green landscape, where flowers blew lushly and tall grasses stood tall, opened outside the window of the bus on which the company had boarded after getting off the station where their train had stopped for the end. It's beautiful here. Agatha sighed. It is? Tony smiled. Summer is in full swing, but this is, and just the beginning. The most beautiful there, beyond the village, by the river. Such onions as spill in summer, so pure jungle, cows are lost. It's good in the forest too. By the way, there are no ticks, such a biological anomaly, but mushrooms and berries. Tony, it turns out, could not only cook well, be a friend who in difficulties does not abandon, but also to poor nightingale. At last the bus stopped. We got out with our small luggage. Agatha looked around. How do we go from here? Whether we walk or hire a carriage. I have no idea. Hey, May, I've never been here before. Tony addressed May in such a familiar way that Agatha was alarmed, but the girl only smiled again in her own way and sent that they were to be met, and suddenly she jumped, waved her arms. A car appeared on the road, which at a closer look seemed to Agatha and Tony to be a runaway museum piece. They haven't made one of these in half a century, no less. Tony shook his head as an open-top car with a pale cream-colored body and cherry upholstery came to a stop. The driver was an old man, looking as ancient as the vehicle. Grandpa, hi. May threw herself on his neck. The vixen returned. He looked attentively at the companions of the master's daughter, as if X-rayed. Who are they? Our dear Joe and the bride. Agatha expected the game to start a little later. It's about time, guess, Grandpa said, not smiling, but friendly. May's marriage is scheduled for today. That means it should start already. What? What? The girl rounded her eyes, without the bride to read the ceremony. I shrugged my shoulders. Your groom is not well, so they are in a hurry. They weren't expecting you, right? They thought they'd talk about it and send for you, so they get married faster. So that's how it is, yeah, May grumbled, taking the front passenger seat. Drive. That's allowed, Ren won at last, and lovingly stroked the dashboard, which it seemed was very well cared for. It was all gleaming. This is not a city, it is possible, if you judge by the sensations on the deserted, appeared through the field in Grove Road. The car scattered speed far over 100. Tony was delighted. He had never had a car of his own, but he had always wanted one and was partial to one. Agatha was uneasy, even if there were no other cars, even if there was a lot of space around. Grandpa slowed down when the car went over a big hill, and the view opened up in a way that made the townspeople gasp. Near the river, surrounded by a high wooden fence, as if an ancient city, stood a house, a real terrace in 3 floors, looking from afar like a gingerbread house. There were brick buildings, but mostly wooden. In size it looked not like a fair farm, but a whole farm. Not further than 200 meters from the house began the forest, stretching then, as far as the eye can see and closer to the horizon, rising in different hand waves, because there began the mountains, let them great but majestic, and all this view amazed, alarmed the unruly spirits of wild natural elements, beckoned with mystery. But now the car slid down the slope, and the forest turned smoothly into a dark green row of trees, where, it seemed, the sun did not penetrate. They approached one of the gates of the house. Agatha had counted 3 so far, and contrary to her expectations that dormant sectarians live here, Grandpa opened the gate with the help of a remote control pulled out of the glove compartment. "Here we go." "Hurry up." May tugged Agatha's arm out of the cabin. "Run? Where to?" "I'm getting married." Agatha looked confused. She understood May's fears. The groom had come to arrange the marriage, but she didn't think that the events would develop so quickly. "And Joe? I have to talk to him first." "No, you don't." May splashed her hands. "We'll tell him on the spot. But let's go." "It's obviously bad," Tony said, and clung to Agatha. "Come on, let's go help out." There was no time to say hello to the staff in the household. Under their puzzled glances, so ordinary, polite May breathed into the small wing of the house on the left, which was a separate building connected to the main one by a covered gallery. Here the members of her family gathered for serious house councils and such like events as were going on today. May swung the doors open with such force that they nearly flew off their hinges, bursting in with a golden amber whirlwind. Following her, light poured into the darkness, with only a small, stone-built fire in the center of the room glowing. "I'm against it," she exhaled angrily and pointed a finger at the man sitting there. "My brother is also against it, which means you can't make him daddy." Joe sat on the low pew next to Father Steve. The man with the long, graying beard was as stout and powerful as a century-old oak tree. Before his daughter's intrusion, he too had sat with his hands on his knees, conversing with May's fiancé. And this man, on Agatha's first impression, one could at least theater a tale about an evil wizard right now. This old man with the long snow-white beard and the same long hair was dressed in loose pants and a shirt, all black, thickly embroidered with silver and multicolored threads. A large floral ornament changed. He rose as the uninvited to the council invaded, leaning on a carved staff with a scarlet crystal at the tip. May's father and Joe, on the other hand, were dressed quite modern. Plain pants, one had a shirt, the other a blue t-shirt. "May, daughter, why do you dishonor your father?" asked Steve, spreading his hands. "Your brother doesn't mind talking, you know. Why are you acting like this? Are you out of your mind?" "Don't scold the girl, it's from youth," grinned the 100-year-old groom, stroking his beard. "It's nothing, she'll get wiser when she's a wife." May grimaced as if she'd eaten a lemon, but she pulled herself together again. "Joe has a voice against it, because he has a fiancée. He's ready to get married now." Agatha, who had been standing on the sidelines, finally decided to enter so that everyone could see her. "Good afternoon." She smiled, strained, and thought that she had forgotten to specify about customs. Maybe she should greet her fiancé in a special way. "So I've come to see you, Joe, my love." When she finished, it sent shivers down my spine. Agatha felt as if anyone could recognize a lie in her words. "What?" Steve exclaimed. "Joe, when did you get here? Who is she? And you, like May, are going against your father?" "Papa." May practically pushed the ready room. "I was the one who decided. I rushed them." Joe just didn't know how to say it. Her name's Agatha. She treated him, met him with a kind heart when he was a prisoner. And then he was a river stone. But he was guessing his future wife, and he recognized her. He asked me to find her and bring her to him. She had been in love with him for a long time. Steve looked at the stranger incredulously. Not young, city girl. Probably divorced too. Who's that with you? I've never been married. Agatha stuck her chin out proudly. Yes, I'm a city girl, but I come from a decent family. Yes, I'm a modern woman, and I've been in relationships before. But when I met him, I realized what love at first sight was. But I had to let him go. He said he had a commitment to his family, but that was fate's way of doing things. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Tony watching the performance admiringly and sorely at the same time, and I realized I couldn't forget him. So when May came to me, I didn't hesitate to say yes. The man next to me was a friend of mine of old. He volunteered to accompany me on my journey. His name is Tony. I'm ready to be your wife, Joe. Hello, and I'm sorry to barge in on you like this. May was hurrying us along, Tony said. Hurry what for? Steve frowned. And if they're going to get married, why shouldn't my brother have a say in the matter? Agatha wasn't a master of reading other people's emotions, but she could have sworn the last thing Joe wanted to do right now was recognize her as his fiancée. But he rose, stepped toward her. Hello, bride. Forgive me, father. I'm only doing what my heart tells me to do and what the prophecy says. If the wolves no longer respect the ancient law, if they do things that make me ashamed to drive, then perhaps my great-grandfather left the forest in vain. I'm sorry if I've offended you. Then you and I are no more kin. You'll never see me in your house again. I swear by the sky, by the moon, by my sister. He turned around at the door, where everyone had parted in front of him, and you can forget about my plantations in Cyprus too. For a few minutes after he left, everyone was silent. Thanks, kids, Steve sighed. He looked downcast, and Agatha felt bad about what they'd gotten themselves into. Taking care of their old man, shaming them. What can I say to you? Live as you please, and we'll all go to dust. That's how I know. Having said what I wanted to the offspring, I turned to the townspeople. As the owner of the house and the head of the Wolf family, I welcome you and invite you to feel as if it were your home too. Accept food and nourishment here. Stay the night and spend the day. Turn to his again. Well, since you have decided on the seniority, you should fulfill the duties of the head of the family yourself. At least my mother can't see me. Steve's gone. I think we'd better go into the house and talk it over, said Joe, and Agatha, though she was glad to see him, would have liked to go under the ground to avoid the conversation. As they walked across the yard towards the main part of the house, they ran as recently as she could get a better look at everything. The surroundings were clean and one could see people busy with many things, which was probably mandatory in such a huge household. Someone was fixing tools, maybe for mowing. At a long table under an awning, women were picking mushrooms. A flock of geese walked by, driven by a boy with headphones in his ears. He was listening to music loudly. Most of the people we met were dressed quite modern. Is this all your family? Agatha asked. No, just distant relatives. It's more convenient to live together. Workers from neighboring villages rarely come, though they dress well. He glanced at Tony. Yeah, they come from Colorado too. I know a friend worked as a shepherd with you last year. Said it was all right. Personally, I don't mind. I mean, you live a strange, bizarre life. Don't take offense, he said softly. Joe didn't look at Agatha, and he even took Tony's side. He walked beside her. Father doesn't force anyone who doesn't want to take the faith of their ancestors. He doesn't. Just work properly. Don't do stupid things. Don't lie. Tony sighed at those words. If you want, leave. But if you leave for good, you won't get any property or support. And a lot of people leave, May added, because sometimes you can't live like that. I agree. He's overreacting, Joe said. Overreacting? They're not even. She exhaled, clearly trying to calm down. Medieval. Lucky they put the kids in regular school and didn't lock them up at home. And let them go to town when they grow up, Joe added about the rejected fiancé. He realizes times are changing, by the way. He dresses like he's going to a masquerade party. He's got a flock of wives, so, by the way, he's never forced anyone. Yeah? May got mad. 4 and 6 of them came to him, I know for a fact. But they decided for themselves that it's not the sieve or wealth that's nicer. What about me? He fell in love with you in his old age. You look like his first wife. You were a fox, too. He said they don't believe that you'll get along. I hate him. He even gives gifts to the spirit of the forest alone, He doesn't pull anyone else with him. What kind of gifts? Tony got suspicious. Colorful ribbons, pies. I'm not afraid, not of innocent maidens, he grinned. And anyway, you could have been gentler with him. He turned his attention back to his sister. Well, he'll be gone soon. What years? As his children will begin to divide the inheritance, all that he gained will be wasted. If he's so good, why did he bring up normal children? Abitha was tired of listening, so she decided to speak up. That's the way it is. So you feel sorry for this crazy man. Agatha was irritated at his behavior, but she was ready to vent her emotions on anyone. That's nothing to talk about. Come and get yourself settled. Joe pushed open the door to the house, and they walked into what looked like a hallway. Everything was wood, and the furniture was mostly wood. Sis, help the guests get settled in. Tell them how we're doing. He glared at his sister and left. There were many rooms in the house, but none were kept especially for guests or those who were late on business. They just put them in the best ones available. Tony and Agatha had been given door-to-door rooms that were bright, spacious, and decorated, pleasantly enough, with modern furniture and just a touch of antiques. Before leaving them to sort out their things and rest, May said that dinner for the family would be served at 9 and, of course, must be attended. But there wouldn't be much talking required. Thankfully, because the Wolf family had a strict rule about eating at the table and not talking. Agatha felt broken, depressed. Tony, on the other hand, was glowing with curiosity. If you want to see everything, go ahead. No one will bite. May waved her finger at him. I'll show you around. Can I see the kitchen? The man became bolder. Sure, but there's nothing to see. Here are the workshops. It's very interesting to me as a cook professional, you know. Tony pouted importantly, and May agreed with him with a laugh. When they left, Agatha showered in her bathroom, then changed into fresh clothes and decided to look for him on. She realized that she just couldn't take it all if she didn't talk to him thoroughly. Deciding that she would ask one of the locals where to find him, she left the room. Excuse me, do you know where to find Joe? She called out to a girl walking through the courtyard with a stack of ceramic plates. She didn't seem surprised by the stranger's presence. The girl nodded in the direction. Over there in the stable. She brushed her horse and went on. Avitha walked around one building where agricultural equipment was stored. The door was ajar. She saw a guy fiddling with the open hood of one of the tractors. A hoarse neighing was heard ahead, and Agatha found herself in front of a huge barn. She pushed open the small door of an elder near the wide gate and entered. In the warm twilight, a nearby horse merely nudged her with his muzzle as he reached for the stall. The conversation wouldn't have happened if there had been other workers here, but Joe was alone. Hello. He didn't answer anything. He was concentrating on brushing the sides of the Raven Stallion with a brush. Joe, I can explain. May just came in and said you needed to be rescued. She said you could die. I couldn't. Joe, talk to me. What? He turned abruptly, the brush falling to the floor, approached and loomed over her. The man had gotten better since his release, stronger and bigger. His hair had grown back, and Agatha could see that it looked good on him. I shouldn't have done that then. I was a fool, hitting on you, I admit, inhuman, cruel. No, you behaved as human nature sometimes dictates, I replied quietly. I'm not angry, and I don't blame you. You didn't press me to the end after all. The only thing I didn't like now was May being so rude to my father. If you or someone else had come, it wouldn't have made any difference. I could have talked to the neighbors, by the way. They might have gotten the old man to back off. Now I'm lying to my father too. You think that's a good thing after all that's happened? He shook his head, grinning. For my sister's sake, only for her sake I put up with all this. But you know, I understand you wanted to help. But sometimes help can be harmful, I know that. Agatha could feel the tears streaming down her face. She was about to turn around and run away, but Joe stopped her, caught her by the shoulders. Remember how it turned out I owed you? Remember my wish? That's what I want to get now. Tell me why you're like this. Yeah, you wanted to break and run first. Yeah, she came to save him and help May. She was driven by her own special feelings, and she didn't regret it one bit. But so blatantly, but as if another force was driving the woman besides thought. She only released herself from his grasp, took 2 steps, and sat down on a bale of hay. And she spoke. She did not conceal anything, but revealed her whole self, looked so far and deep into her thoughts and feelings, which had recently led her through life, that she became frightened. Joe listened in silence, then came closer and touched her shoulder in a different way. "It's good that you told me everything. It's better this way, believe me." I thought he wanted to say something else, and he spoke. He shared what he had kept silent for a long time, that his father raised him as the heir of the family, did not want to give, as was customary, the right to choose his own destiny. He found special mentors, sent him to the forest for a long time. It was there, in brutal training, that Joe acquired his scars. Agatha timidly asked about the tattoos, and he told her that his father had similar ones. It was the way men of their kind, who were believed to be direct descendants of the werewolf, marked themselves. A century ago, the inhabitants of such tattoos were very afraid of them, believed that they really could shapeshift or their spirit separating from the body, settle it in the beast and so hunt or revenge. It turned out that the training was tough, not only had to learn to fight, but also to learn the language of the beasts. You had to learn on your own skin how to survive in the forest without supplies and fire. They even had to learn how to growl in the animal way. Joe said he realized a long time ago that he disgraced himself, hurt his father by disobeying him when he came back from the zone. His father called him in for a talk, said he had no idea how to pass on the power of the legacy. It would be a disgrace to the whole family, but there was no way out. Dad only loved 2 women in his entire life. They were May and Joe. He never wanted any other children. "I've got to go," said Joe, finishing his story. "I'll be back for supper. You go wherever you want. Keep an eye out. I've told the right people about you. Don't worry, they won't hurt you anywhere." Agatha, however, left the stable in a hurry. She wasn't afraid of horses, but she didn't feel comfortable staying in this strange room. It was still sunny outside, even though it was getting late in the evening, but it was better than in the stable. The woman tried to put everything that had just happened between her and Joe out of her mind. She just wandered here and there, but as she passed the goat pen, she suddenly stopped. She thought she saw someone she recognized. "Mark," she called out to the guy who was feeding the animals. "Agatha." He dropped the bucket, which pleased the goat who rushed to him. He stood up, his eyes rounded. "What are you doing here?" "So I'm free, doctor, so I have rights as a free man." "It's clear you do." I waved my hand. "What are you doing here?" Agatha nodded, feeling a vicious sympathy for Joe. She wanted to find out more about him back in the zone, and that's why Mark had found out. She remembered that he was the only one close to him. "You work here?" "I'm not a shepherd, which means I've got a whole belly full of cattle, and they're going to send me back to school." The guy bent down for the bucket, and then Agatha realized what at first seemed so strange about the ex-convict. His arm, maimed long ago, now looked perfectly healthy. Mark, noticing the interest in his limb, was embarrassed and even hid it behind his back. "How is that? How is that possible?" Professional interest flared up in Agatha. "You where?" "Cured," Mark answered quietly but importantly. "Impossible. You can see that, just not city doctors, but here." "What do you mean?" "Well, they took me to a grandmother, and she slowly straightened me out." "Well, that's pretty slow. In the month I haven't seen you, it couldn't have happened." "Believe it or not, it did. It's just that she knows herbs and incantations and words and secrets. It's unscientific." "I'm sorry, I'm a free man and I thought I had the right to take a risk. Only if you need to treat something yourself. I warn you, she's a bad woman, she charges a lot, and they say she may not accept you. She'll say it's your destiny to be sick and won't accept you." "And it's not your destiny," Agatha grinned. "How much did he pay?" "Every own has his own price. She told me not to take a drop of alcohol in my mouth." Mark replied bluntly. "I'm sorry, Agatha, but I have cattle to feed." "Everything. Then I have to catch goats to mark their ears." "Work. I can't talk." Leaving the boy alone, Agatha decided to go back into the house and at the very porch ran into Tony, who looked unusually agitated. "Can you believe it? They've got real ovens here, the real ones, like they used to have when the Tsars were here. And the utensils are all old and working, frying, boiling. If we could have such a restaurant in my former restaurant, we'd be Paris." Agatha listened to Tony and couldn't believe her ears. "You said you were afraid of wolves and other animal clans." "I've been listening to gossip and not the smartest people. The people who work here are outsiders, and they pay well. Listen yourself. It turns out that according to the old faith and other paganism, the owner and his wife, his son, his daughter, and 20 other people are left here. It's more, as the legend already looks. They do it before the rite to keep the tradition alive. Kind of like we do in the cities. Halloween is idle. And the people who gossiped, they're the drunks. They were kicked out because they couldn't work and they stole property. Oh, I was a fool myself. My neighbor comes here every year where the passive begins. He helps me to check if the grain is good. He's a retired agronomist. He told me, I argued with him, that the sectarians were fooling him, but it turns out they were fooling him. As you know, sighed the woman. And these are the people I deceive. Tony darkened sharply. It's not good. Abitha did not have time to answer. Suddenly, some girl with a bag in her hands rushed past them, followed by another. All were hurrying to the main part of the house. She tried to stop the third one. What's wrong? Stevie's not feeling well. He's got a heart attack. They sent for the herbalist. It's a long way from here. He lives old. Shall we call an ambulance? Abatha frowned. They would have called someone else, but Steve doesn't recognize it. That's all. You know. Abatha put her hands to her sides, professional indignation bubbling up inside her. Take me to him. The girl batted her eyelashes. I'm a doctor and his son's fiancée won't dare refuse my help, and turned to Tony. Please be careful. The master of the house and family lay in his upper rooms. Steve was not well, shivering as if from cold, as always felt strange if his heart ceased. He lay on his side and ordered all the blankets he could find to cover himself. That's nothing. He opened his eyes when Agatha came into the room. Go away. I'm a doctor and I can't stay away. Does it hurt? It's getting better. Let's lie down normally on the back, not on the left side, with the heart. What are you doing, girl? I've already sent for the witch doctor. I'm for her. Do not argue sick. She looked sternly, sighing. Steve lay down as instructed. Agatha pulled all the blankets off him, opened the window. It's stifling in here. You're a modern man, Steve. Any heart disease? I had a heart attack a long time ago. Where's your first aid kit? I don't recognize it. I'm sorry, but this is not how it's going to be today. I'm sorry. You could end up in the hospital. How will the farm be without you? You know how to talk. I snorted, but I didn't argue anymore. He sent a servant girl who looked into the room to get a first aid kit, then took some medicine for his heart. Agata wrote on a piece of paper what could be bought at the pharmacy without a prescription, and Steve, sighing again, said he would send a man to the pharmacy in the nearest village. I'm sorry I took it badly. It's all right, she replied and averted her eyes. You're worried about the children. Tack, at first I thought, urban, ordinary, but you're so worried about the old man. Maybe it's true what the stone on the river said. I won't interfere with your happiness. Agatha wanted to punch herself in the face, so she pretended to look at the colorful doormat. So, weddings, of course, are not a quick matter, but we can organize a rite of passage. We'll do it tonight. What? Agatha forgot how to breathe. Don't be frightened. It's not hard. It's not scary. We'll just gather the whole family, and some of our friends will come. We'll dress you up, sing praises to the spirit. And then we can leave the wedding without hurrying. You'll be almost like a wife, he winked. It used to be, if in the olden days they prepared for this rite for so long, they sewed the bride's shirt for 3 full moons. But times have changed, so let's hurry up, but with respect. Agatha found the strength not to give herself away in any way. She thanked Steve for the fact that he had agreed to treat her with more than just herbal remedies. She went out quietly, shut the door behind her. She calmly returned to her assigned room, and here she closed the door behind her and literally slid down the wall. What's going on? They had agreed only on a small deception, and now, in front of the whole family, to play the role of the bride? No, she can't go through with it and let Joe fight 1,000 opponents, but excuse me, you have to think of yourself. It's the whole family coming out to lie to her face. Who does that make her? And all for who? For a convict. Even if he's crazy handsome, who could only talk and kissed her once. For a girl who's being married against her will. She found a stranger's aunt, pityingly, to throw the care on her shoulders, and she's a goat happy. No. Agatha wiped her tears and got up. She had had enough of this. The woman was about to go and find Tony and tell him that they were leaving urgently, and then to write or call Steve from the city when she felt better and explain everything. What a dumb thing to do, but she didn't have time because there was a knock at the door. And when she opened it, behind her stood a woman in her 40s, beautiful, curly-haired. "Hello, I'm Sarah, his mother." Her face was glowing with happiness. In her arms, she carefully held some kind of a roll. Happiness, Luda's sister, into the house peeped, stepped into the room, followed by May, slipped in, averting her eyes. It was obvious that the girl was also shocked by the pace and direction of events. "I was afraid that my Joe would be a loner until he turned gray. He's stupid and I haven't. But I found the one who warmed his heart. Here's this for you." She dropped the package on the bed and unwrapped it, shook it, carefully unwrapping either a floor shirt or a dress. The long white cotton garment was embroidered with flowers at the collar, sleeves, and hem. Cornflowers, poppies, clovers, daisies, and many other field flowers seemed as if alive in the silk, and between them was a pattern of golden threads, embroidered animal footprints, which Agatha guessed were, of course, those of a wolf. "It's not Steve anymore, I've decided," Joe's mother said with a wink. "I wore this shirt when I was at the Rite, and my grandmother before me. Take it as a gift, honey, and call me Mama now." She hugged her bestly, tightly. Agatha felt that a little more her heart would stop, because now she did not know what to say. "Thank you. I don't even know how to thank you. This is so unexpected, right?" "Yeah, sure, but I need to talk to Tony. It's urgent." "Don't worry," Joe's mother smiled. "He already knows about it. He's getting ready too. Now you need to wash and comb your hair." Agatha was well aware that the situation of their little company of conspirators was getting worse by the moment. But a long time ago, Agatha was skiing down the mountain, and it so happened that she lost her poles and rolled down, realizing that she had to slow down, but not realizing how to do it. She was afraid of losing her balance and rolled down until she fell. And this case was something similar. It was possible to refuse help in such a personal matter as washing. But then Agatha was handled with great skill and precision. She was given a shirt, and when she was dressed under a sash or woven belt of many leather straps, silver ancient coins and colorful stones, and put into red shoes of soft leather, which seemed very much like the softened shoes once seen in a museum. The hair was left loose at the insistence of Joe's mother. Agatha removed her earrings and a simple pendant. She almost shuddered when she heard that her husband was already giving her new jewelry to his wife. He would go a month or two without them, and after the wedding night you would lavish them on her. Promising herself comfortingly that it would not come to that, Agatha finally went out, accompanied by her mother and a few other women. When the doors to the great hall opened, Agatha was almost blind for a moment, for there were so many candles, torches, and braziers everywhere. The ceremonial hall, her mother whispered in her ear. It hadn't been opened in a long time. The last time was May's 16th birthday. There were people sitting on benches along the walls, not many people, but their eyes were fixed on Agatha. A few young girls looked at her with frankly unkind eyes and cast warm and sad glances at Joe. Apparently, the handsome man was theoretically in demand here. But what was surprising to Agatha was that she wasn't jealous. She would have been more than happy to hand him over to one of them. "Take that brunette over there," wearing a wreath of cornflowers, her nose reddened from recent tears. The girl was being held by her shoulders and whispered to by an older man, probably her father. Steve stood in the center of the hall near a tall, powerful pillar covered with carvings. The top of it was like a grinning wolf's face. Below it, all the forest animals walked along the tree branches. It looked like some kind of artifact. An idol? Agatha didn't know, and she just wanted to believe it wasn't something sinister. At the foot of the pillar were stacked flowers, ears of grain, and fruit. Nothing meaty. That was good. Finally, Agatha decided to look directly at Joe. He was dressed almost like her, the same pattern on the white cloth, only the shirt was shorter, and there were pants. But Agatha didn't understand why Tony was also dressed the same way. Apparently, from the look on his face, realizing her confusion, his mother smiled at him and raised her hand, calling for silence. "Tonight is a great night. Our son and heir to the family will find a wife. First, their souls will unite, and after the wedding, which we will soon play, they will have a family of their own. He will become a man. You don't know our customs yet, but here's what you need to know for today. This is your lover and your best friend. The latter could be a father, a brother, a nephew, any relative. The main thing is that not only the groom at the rite was, but also another man, the essence of which is to be the patron, the protector of the girl until marriage. At this moment, until the light of the full moon touches the couple, that the groom, that the attendant as if equal. So we pay tribute to one fairy tale that the foremother of our family chose with whom she should stay, with a human or with a jack. Now go to the bridegroom." Agatha felt as if she were treading on hot ground. She felt nauseous. She had to gather her strength and shout in front of everyone that it was all a hoax to save May and Joe. "My chosen one, hold out your hand to me and accept the marriage bracelet," Joe said calmly and without feeling. The jewelry glittered on his open palm. Agatha forgot how to breathe and wished it would all just go away like a bad dream. If the real wolves had come here with a suggestion to go into the thicket, she would have run to them, squealing with happiness. "Wait, can I say something?" Tommy suddenly stepped forward. "Don't get involved," Steve growled, but his wife shushed him, or rather growled, and he bowed his head. "It's out of order. But you talk," she said to Tony. "We're free to talk. What are you trying to say?" "I apologize. First of all," Tommy wiped his forehead. "It was hot in the hall, despite the fact that part of the roof was missing. And secondly, I'm curious about this. I've read a little about your customs, but I'm asking for clarification, so to speak. Did I understand correctly that in this rite where we are now, me and Joe represent the two sides between which the bride must choose? So according to your customs, the bride could theoretically go not to the groom, but to the attendant, unless it's a close relative, of course. Is that right?" "True, really, it's never happened." Steve divorced his hands. "I don't see why not. My great-great-grandmother did it," Sarah said. "She was a mute. She got her secret fiancé to show up like that. But my Joe wouldn't do that. You learn what happens when you do things without thinking." "Sarah, what are you talking about?" "Shut up." Steve frowned, but his wife withstood her husband's displeasure with a straight look, and he had to give in and back off again. "Mom, what's wrong?" asked May, who had been standing quietly with the other girls, who were whispering among themselves like a flock of birds. "Does everyone know what night it is?" Sarah asked and looked around at the crowd. "Night of reconciliation," came a voice from the far bench. That's right. Steve had rushed the ceremony to smooth over the fact that the hare's wife would be a stranger from out of town and not of the animal kind. But also on this night, it is supposed to open secrets, and everyone can count on the fact that he will be forgiven, that he will not be punished. This is how our ancestors and the wolves lived. The people quieted down, listened attentively, and nodded. One could already understand, though, Steve, as a man ruled over everything, the true and not less influence was also possessed by his wife. And here is the truth. It was revealed to me by this man. She threw forward her hand, pointing to Tony. "Say what you've told me, and don't be afraid." Agatha stood with her mouth still open. "I must apologize again," Tony said, coughing, and continued. "I've always been a friend of Agatha's. We met when we were young, and I fell in love with her. But before I could admit it, it turned out I was just a good friend to her. And then she moved to another city, and we drifted apart. But then, well, that's a very personal story. I will only say that I came when she needed help, and I realized that I loved her. But I was afraid that if I confessed, she would not agree to friendship, because one man had hurt her, done a terrible thing, ruined her life. I didn't want her to think I only wanted one thing. And then the other day she called me, and it turns out she needs my help again." Tony finally gathered his thoughts, apparently, and summarized, coherently, quickly, everything they had in mind. Added several times that they meant no harm to anyone, didn't know it would go that far, and that he was a man with prejudices. And once he arrived and saw how things really were here, he realized he couldn't lie. He said he'd met Sarah while looking around, and he'd opened up to her. And she said that now it would be better to apologize in front of everyone on a special night. Tony was silent, looking at Agatha, and she at him. So he loves her, and he's been silent all these years. And she thought that she was just not interested in him. But she dreamed how many times that would be to meet a man like her best friend. And Agatha said it all out loud. She just shouted it. "Here I am," Tony answered, and approached with determination. "I love you. You love me too, or you're ready to love me. And I know it will happen. Marry me, Agatha," he added in a quieter voice. "What more do you want? They've already dressed us up for the wedding." There was silence for a few minutes, and then suddenly Steve jumped up and slammed his shoulder into the wooden wolf idol. The pillar fell, resounding throughout the hall. "What's that?" asked Tony, who had taken a few moments to get next to Agatha and hug her, scared for her. "This means that the master of the house and the family forgives everyone and everything in this room, and whoever asks for anything will fulfill it," Sarah exclaimed, raising her hands to the starry sky. Steve was breathing heavily, looking around at everyone. What else am I supposed to do? Turn into beasts and attack those who came to the houses? Deceive like that? I don't know how. And it's true what they say, wolves have become more savage. But I forgive you, because it turns out my Joe won't marry a city girl, because it turns out that good lives in my house, if you've changed your mind about deceiving me. Papa, don't marry me to a man I don't love. May was the first to speak. And let me go. I'm real. I want to be a teacher in the big world, not just at home. Steve, while we're at it, a stout, red-bearded man got up from the bench. Would you be so kind as to add to the harvest budget? There's no way I can do it by hand. Well, people have invented technology. It's time to keep up with the times. That everything is possible. And an extra day off a week. Some guy gasped, but an older woman lightly tapped him on the back of the head. Think about what you're saying. It's a night like this. Steve, you made me chief accountant, and for that I thank you forever. I'll tell you what I suggest. We don't want anyone saying too much. They're gonna ask me if I'm gonna build a pool. What are you gonna do? Maybe we'll postpone the petition until later. Maybe someone who needs something in writing. Let them do it and fall down after thinking carefully. You've taken everything away from me. Steve waved his hands, his face flushed, breathing hard. Have we kept many traditions? What kind of wolves are we today? Just a prefix to the family name. All of you remember the story of where we came from and how we came to be, and who can tell you what the spirit of the forest is like? No one. All of you joking around and sitting on your phones. Now you can't even ask properly from the bottom of your heart, and in one night, the only night you don't know how to do it. And you know what? I'm sick of it. I'll take my neighbor, the head of the family, and go into the forest. We'll live, we'll do all kinds of trades, we won't be lost. I'm fed up with everything. Let go, Daddy, let go. The same black-haired girl, she'd been looking at him tenderly. Steve, don't ruin it, fell on her knees before him. I'm not of your family, I'm just the daughter of your worker from the village. My grandfather served you faithfully. Forgive me and let me be your son Joe's wife. Accept me into the family. I don't want to get married. Joe exclaimed, and there was so much genuine horror in that voice that Steve laughed. What a puppy. So he's gone on a crime, he's decided to cheat his father. We don't want to get married. Here's for you, he shook his fist under his nose. She'll be your bride for a year, then decide. If she's not nice, I won't force her, I'll take her as my wife. I'm only joking. What are you afraid of? If you don't marry her, I'll give her more dowry than May, and let her choose a normal man. As for you, I turned to Agatha and Tony, who were still standing silent and side by side. You've made a mess of things, so what do we do with you? Forgive and let go, Tony said carefully. It's a special night. That's right, but first things first. Guests have never left the House of the Wolves without gifts, and you, I understand, decided to get married, even if not according to our faith. That's fine, I understand that, but whether you marry or not, I'll take the doctor for myself. You're a bad spring wolf, Sarah grinned, tugging at her husband's sleeve. I agree, Agatha said. She suddenly realized that only next to Tony, she had always felt good and calm, that for many years she had not been able to see her happiness. And even if she had to go through all this now, but she would not repeat that distant mistake. She would not give up on him. Tony looked at his beloved and hugged her tighter. Well, in that case, Steve grinned, I'll give you the apiary until. Sarah turned to his wife. Even if we don't marry our son today, but why should the table set be lost? Whoever's hungry follows me and eats like a wolf. That's how it was decided. The evening turned so unexpectedly that everyone had something to talk about. If it was not the rule at the wolf's table to eat without chattering, there was no silence at all, but never serious talk. Agatha and Tony joined everyone as they changed their clothes. It was strange to stay in such outfits, and Sarah's dress shirt was afraid to get anything on it at all. The next day they said goodbye and left. Agatha tried to refuse the apiary, but Steve shoved her in the side. It's a gift, there'll be resentment. Besides, he was an economic man and knew that it was not a simple apiary, but one with honey, which is willingly bought, and it can bring a solid income. So there would be something to subdue his mother's house, and of course something to settle the family nest on. Agatha took a new look at Joe. Could this be the same man who had once stood in her office and she had angrily thrown at him? Dress off. He was depressed, he was guilty before his father, and he was forgiven. He was the sole heir to his family. And history, a lot of obligations, was burdened by it, but he couldn't renounce it. Well, a new trial was in store for him. The swarthy and black-haired beauty, whose name was Mila, turned out to be a longtime friend of Sarah's, and something told Agatha that now the boy who had once scattered opponents with one hand now had no chance of remaining unmarried, unconquered. May just didn't dance with happiness. Steve promised to pay for any tuition and let her go anywhere as a teacher. He only demanded a promise from his daughter that he would introduce her fiancé and bring her grandchildren to visit her often. On the way back to the city, passing by a grove, Agatha suddenly noticed the first yellow leaves on the trees. "Autumn is coming," she said quietly. "Why, it's very natural," Tony shrugged. "Tony, do you think we'll make it?" "I think life will tell, but I personally will just try to make you really happy."
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.